Good morning. Welcome to the June 9th, 2026 information and news you can use. It's our daily situational brief, Indigenous focused disaster and emergency management. My name is Brad Eisen with Hazardscape, and we are here live most days when we're able to make it to provide situational awareness on the multi-hazard world across First Nations, Metis and Inuit communities. And we would not be able, this would not be possible without the support from our sponsors. So I first want to recognize Indigenous owned All About Abatement. Kyle Davidson is a First Nations entrepreneur. He runs All About Abatement, which does asbestos, lead, and mold removal, hazardous material assessments, hazardous material removal at construction sites during renovations. That includes toxic metals, organics, liquids, chemical waste, construction waste. So if you're looking for abatement services pre or post emergency or disaster, All About Abatement is your team. And I can't say enough what it means that we're able to get sponsorship through All About Abatement, and which means we don't have to accept government grants, government funding, or government contracts, which helps us to continue to advocate for Indigenous communities without having to be beholden to government departments and their funding. So thank you to Kyle and All About Abatement for their sponsorship and making this possible, along with our training for emergency management. You can get your Indigenous Basic Emergency Management Certificate on our app right now at app.hazardscape.com. And I also want to thank our other sponsor, Premier Fire and Flood Restoration. They do fire and water restoration across the country with a high focus on Indigenous communities, schools, band offices, on-reserve homes, off-reserve homes, homes in settlements, and Inuit communities. And they, through their reconciliation strategy, are sponsoring this situation briefing as well with our Indigenous Emergency Management Certificate Program. So again, if you want to access that program, you can head over to app.hazardscape.com. But Darcy and Riley at their team at Premier Fire and Flood, they do leak detection, accelerated drying. They even have, for remote communities, a staged 50-foot trailer that is full of dehumidifiers and fans ready to deploy across the country, especially to remote communities that need fire and flood restoration services quickly. So thank you again to our sponsors, Premier Fire and Flood and All About Abatement. So getting on to our live briefing this morning. And again, if you want a copy of this briefing, it's available on our app right now. You get this archive of all past briefings with the new one, and you can download it in a Word document. We have our opening summary, so we're still keeping track of the Matagami First Nation State of Emergency and Evacuation Order, which was declared June 2nd. And the Weenus First Nation declared a state of emergency June 2nd and evacuated residents to Thunder Bay. Manitoba remains in a province-wide state of emergency due to spreading wildfires, with the majority of the province under extreme fire danger. And we'll take a look at the fire danger map and the temperatures that are increasing there shortly. Kannakuster 28 of Pelican Narrows in Saskatchewan. That was the third homicide investigation last month in a community of fewer than 3,000. So our thoughts and prayers are with Pelican Narrows and to Kiana's family. They are still searching for the man responsible, and PBCN leadership has flown to Ottawa this week to speak with the Federal Minister of Indigenous Services about this ongoing crisis in their community. Pecan Kikam First Nations renewed state of emergency over its collapsing water systems, and ISK Minister Jody Mandy Galmasti, Minister Mandy Galmasti is committed to introducing First Nations clean water legislation by June 19th. So those are the issues of significance in our opening summary. But if you want to dig more into these and the fire startups across each treaty nation, territory, province, and Canada, you can head over and download our app right now. So where we're going to start off is we're just going to take a quick peek at the flood risk right now. We've seen the flood risk escalating, continuing to escalate across Alberta, Saskatchewan. So we're not going to hit extreme peak flows until probably, it looks like, June the 11th. So another couple days throughout much of Alberta, central North Alberta and Saskatchewan. Even river forecasts up here are just starting to peak. So depending on where you are around Fort Chip, they're going to hit extreme levels here in a couple of days. Down in Lac La Biche, they seem to be peaking right now, and they'll continue those flows for the next few days. So even along the Mackenzie River, it's kind of started to tamper down a little bit as ice seasonal spring breakup continues and they receive the inflow of water. Ontario, still a little bit of higher water flows there, but with the heat that's coming and is there, we're going to see that start to continue to decrease as well. So overall flood risk across First Nations, Metis, Inuit communities, relatively stable with the higher risk areas in Saskatchewan and Alberta. So if we flip over to our extreme weather, you can see the Inuit lands, Dene Saulteaux lands. We've also got treaty nations in the red, and then Clecho. So what we're looking at here is we've still got these extreme heat warnings for today, 29 Celsius, through much of northern Ontario and into Quebec. And then we still have this precipitation rainfall warning in Rankin region, including Whale Cove. So heavy rains are expected to continue through there. So that gives you a bit of a picture of, why we're starting to see the fire danger increase across Ontario and into Quebec. And now you can see even from yesterday, parts of central Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, they're now into a moderate high to extreme fire risk, with Ontario and Quebec moving more into that high and very high extreme fire risk. So in terms of the fire weather index, seeing much of the same, but all this is telling us is that across the country there's still the ability for fires to start even in the blue low fire weather index areas. But if fires do spark up in the yellow to tan to darker red areas, that's where those intense fires are going to happen, which is why much of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec are now, at a higher risk with the fire weather index, because if fires do start in those darker red to tan and yellow areas, those fires are going to be quite intense. And that's mostly, again, being exacerbated by the weather. So this is the weather outlook for today, this afternoon. You can see here that high heat weather is starting to flow back west into Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and will continue through Ontario, Quebec, and is starting to drift into Atlantic Canada. So they're going to continue to see a lot of dry weather. The weather temperatures are starting to again increase through Northwest Territories and Alberta, while BC has a bit of a reprieve here over the next day. But taking a look at tomorrow's forecast in the afternoon, you're going to see that heat continue to hang around Ontario and Quebec. This is Thursday afternoon, Friday afternoon. Saturday, Sunday. So Ontario, Manitoba, not going to see any type of reprieve from that hot, dry weather until the weekend. So this week is going to be continued, increase of fire risk. If we take a look at potential thunderstorms here, we'll look at what could be moving through the week. There's nothing really significant today, which means no lightning strikes, which is good news. But let's take a look at what we're looking in terms of any sort of forecasted thunder showers. So we'll just move along here for the week. We do see Tuesday night, fairly significant thunderstorm creeping through Manitoba, Ontario. If that brings lightning, with that dry weather, that's where you're going to see some of those more of those startups, even into Wednesday afternoon. You can see there's some thunder showers forecasted in Ontario for Wednesday. So keep an eye on new fire starts as these storms kind of develop and progress across Manitoba and Ontario. And then getting into the weekend, this is Friday morning. Friday afternoon, we see again across Quebec some developing and forecasted. Just keep a reminder, these are all forecasted. And then Saturday, a little bit developing there. Again, it's Northwest Territories and up in Quebec. And then we wrap up with Sunday afternoon with some forecasted storms. So we'll see how much that brings in terms of lightning strikes. But I would say if this one on Wednesday evening holds, you can see those dark purple colors there. That's where we get into, kind of the more extreme risk of hail or precipitation. That's where you may see some lightning strikes. That combined with how dry it is, that is just going to increase the risk for the week. So still a high risk, but if we look back compared to where we were a year ago on June the 9th, totally different story. Over in the west, very extreme fire risk last year, while Manitoba, Ontario, and even Quebec was a little bit lower. But looking at this year right now, what the picture looks like, very different story. So even though there is high risk or a lot of lower, what looks like to be lower risk, there's still potential for fires to start up anywhere. It's just dependent on how intense and how quickly they'll move. If we look at our new fire start map for present time, yeah, you can see a little cluster up here in Alberta and just around Fort Simpson. We get into Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and then this cluster that's just kind of all ramped up here in the last couple of days. So out of control being the purple, and monitored red being just out of control, and they're probably just letting it. There's a full response there. Take out under control and being held. So if we just look at out of control and out of control monitored, I want to figure out, let's see what those, I forget what those ones mean. Wildfire is being observed and analyzed, but is imminently suppressed. It may be allowed to burn, whereas modified response, personnel use a variety of techniques. Let's see what else this one says here. Out of control monitored, being held under control. So that's what those mean in terms of this map. So for example, this is a monitored response. So that means out of control monitored fires of the monitored response type are being observed and assessed, but not immediately suppressed, as there's no suppression action being taken. The wildfire is burning and is expected to continue growing. But when you click on it, you can see full response. So chances are those ones are being tended to by fire crews. But you know, when you also look at the ones that are under control and then being held, there's a decent amount of activity right now based on where we can see. And you kind of watch that belt from Ontario to Manitoba up into Northwest Territories, because that's also where that heat likes to kind of run, and that's where it's been really dry, and the majority of wildfire activity has been in the country for the, since recorded history, right? So just something to watch out for as we go through this summer. But again, if you are looking for this, or you're just joining us partway through, you can get this briefing every day at app.hazardscape.com. Take a look at the fire smoke map and forecast. So not too bad. Hopefully that someone cutting grass outside, hopefully it's not coming through too loud. But we've got the fire smoke here, still not horrible. If there's some smaller communities in these areas, they're going to see a little bit of an increase or decrease in their air quality, but we're not seeing the large plumes that we're kind of used to in the summer. But again, it's only June the 9th, so we'll see what happens there. And then, yeah, with those heat warnings lasting all day, we're going to be watching those patterns. So again, I just want to say again, one last time, thanks to our sponsors, All About Abatement. It's Indigenous entrepreneur Kyle Davidson and his team. If you need a hazardous materials assessment, whether on reserve or off reserve, give them a call. They do amazing work. Lead, asbestos, mold assessments, removal. They seal everything up tight, and we've got a podcast on them on our YouTube channel where we go through their shop, and Kyle takes us through some of the equipment and processes. And then, of course, our sponsor, Premier Fire and Flood, thank you to them for sponsoring this briefing and the training on our website at app.hazardscape.com. Again, if you want to engage with Premier Fire and Flood, either about vandalism restoration, diagnostics of leak detections, loss assessments, even disaster restoration, fire damage, and flood or water damage, give Darcy and his team a call at the number on their website at premierfireandflood.com. All right, I think that rounds it up for today. If you do want to head over to our site, under our resource library, you can get all of the links that we use for our data and monitoring program. And within our learning library, you can access our learning articles, access our learning accounts, and just do some quick research on the various roles. The learning library is also where you can access our course. It's a certificate course where you will end up with a digital badge and downloadable certificate for your employment or for job, whatever you need. So yeah, I think that's good. All right, thank you everyone. Have a good day. And again, as always, know your hazardscape and stay prepared. We'll see you tomorrow.